Hey there and welcome back to Rimworld. My name is Pete and as usual today we complete another episode of our Rimworld Ice Sheet Survival series. Now we ended the last episode on a bit of a sad note, slaughtering our pet buffalo, but we also have positive news. Our Husky couple is pregnant and Cambiar also survived a sizable pirate raid in the last episode. And today we kick things off with a crashed escape pod, so the episode is already off to a good start. The colonist here, however, will sadly not join the colony long term. It seems like he's really only capable as a fighter, and while we could use another body with a gun in its hands, the abrasive trait and the sizable number of injuries here are in my opinion not really worth the effort. We then jump over to Cambiar, who's also out on the ice sheet on a hauling trip. We had a cargo pod full of camel hair crash down in the last episode, and since camel hair has pretty good protective qualities, Cambiar is now on his way to haul some of it back to the base. Just as he's on his way back, we then have even more cargo pods crash down. This time we have a drop of flake on the ice sheet, a fairly cheap mood enhancing drug, which is also incredibly addictive and will therefore definitely not be used by Cambiar. We will however queue it up to be hauled. The 23 units here are not super valuable, but they should still make us a nice profit. On top of that, they have dropped fairly close to the base, and so before Cambiar heads off to bed for today, we'll send him out for one more hauling trip. And actually I decided to make it 2 trips. Yes, Cambiar is getting pretty tired, but the camel hair is deteriorating rather quickly, and so Cambiar is still up on his feet in the early morning hours, hauling the second and final batch of camel hair back to the base. There are now still 18 units of camel hair left out on the ice sheet, but in my opinion those are not worth another round of hauling, so instead we'll just leave them out there. Once the camel hair is safely stored away and Cambiar has eaten something, it is now high time to go off to bed. However, Cambiar's sleep is quickly interrupted by a bulk goods trader who's passing by in his trade ship. Now luckily we have the flake already hauled back, which means we can immediately sell it again here, alongside all of the dead man's clothing that we obtained while butchering in the previous episode. The trade here will earn us just over 300 silver, a nice amount considering we didn't really have all that much to sell. Speaking of trade, with the trade ship still in orbit, we then have another opportunity to do business, as a group of visitors from the Grey Leopard Born is passing by. Now, in the time it takes them to get here, we will have Cambiar continue butchering. We still have the buffalo and 8 human corpses in our storage room, and I think now is a good time to process them. One buffalo and 3 human corpses later then, the trading opportunities do not stop. This time another group from the Grey Leopard Born comes to visit, a much bigger one this time, and they also have items to trade. In the early morning hours then the first group arrives at our base. By the way, it is now already the first day of autumn, so we have once again successfully survived summer without an infestation. Now, in terms of trading, we can sell off a few weapons and more dead man's clothing here. Nothing spectacular, but good enough to make us a further 125 silver. After a few more hours of sleep, the second caravan then also makes its way over to the base, and so we once again send Cambiar out, hoping to make another good deal. This time, however, we don't have much to work with. The merchant here only sells a handful of items. They also don't seem to be particularly interested in what we have to offer, and so Cambiar will have to walk away without any money changing hands. This now at least allows Cambiar to focus a bit more on the Huskies, who are due for another training session. One attempt succeeds, the other one fails, and with that we now have both Huskies only one successful training attempt away from learning how to haul. And at least for the male Husky Ace, that successful attempt follows on the next morning. As Cambiar finally manages to get himself an animal helper, Ace has now finally learned how to haul stuff. His female partner Ruby isn't quite as quick, but still, even with only one helper for the time being, this could now make Cambiar's job a whole lot easier. Now, in order to be fully able to use Ace's new hauling abilities, we have to unrestrict him. That means he can wander everywhere, which is of course useful if your job is to haul stuff around. And here we can actually see it for the first time. Ace is now walking over to the silver that the orbital trader left for us, and he will now carry that into our big storage room. Now, Ace's access to the storage room also means that in theory he has access to the human meat, which is understandably something I would like to avoid. So we will probably have to build a freezer down the line, one that is off limits for the Huskies and can only be used by Cambiar. The first thing we do on the next morning though is to continue the training. Even though Ruby here is in the later stages of her pregnancy, she will give birth in only a few days, but apart from impacting her movement speed, the pregnancy has no negative effects on her hauling abilities. And those hauling abilities have just been unlocked. Just like Ace, Ruby is now able to carry stuff around, and with that the colony now has 3 haulers instead of only 1. And the extra hauling power already pays off as Cambiar continues butchering here. Even though the Huskies do not always haul stuff immediately, they are still a great help cleaning up the remains of the dead bodies. And while we're on the topic of dead bodies, the remains from the crashed escape pod are still up here on the map. The person inside no longer amongst the living, but now is an excellent time to haul them back to the base, since Cambiar is busy butchering anyway. With the corpse then neatly chopped into pieces, the work at the butcher table for today then comes to an end, and Cambiar and the Huskies can focus on cleaning up the room. This now continues for a few hours on the next morning, until the room is all tidied up again. Up next on the to-do list is now in fact the creation of a small meat storage room for Cambiar. I really don't want to micromanage the Huskies too much. At the same time, I still want them to be able to access the entire map while staying away from Cambiar's human meat reserves. So we are now finally making use of that small tunnel next to Cambiar's research and dining room, and we'll turn it into a small storage space where Cambiar can safely store and protect his human meat. The Huskies are thankfully helping a bit in the construction process, while we also make the switch from steel to sandstone walls, just to save a bit of steel and also because the sandstone walls are a bit more durable. With the final room constructed, we can then put a stockpile down, which is where all of the human meat will now be transferred to. Alright, here we are, that's 544 units of human meat safely stored away. Now in theory the Huskies could still access this room, but as part of their hauling duties they should have no business going there, and will therefore hopefully stay away from the human meat inside. On the next morning then we continue things with a bit more research. In the last episode we already started the multi-analyzer research project, which is the gateway to pretty much all of the high-level technology in the game, and therefore it is absolutely essential if we actually want to complete the game and escape the planet. Now at this point I also realized that the Huskies were still having no problem eating Cambiar's human meat reserves. So it seems like we will actually have to restrict this area now, which honestly is a bit of a hidden function in the game. First of all, we'll have to create a new animal area here, and then, and this seems a bit counterintuitive, mark the freezer as that animal area. Once that is done, we'll go back to the Manage Areas tab, and here for that animal area we'll click on Invert. This now makes it so that the entire map is Animal Area 1, except for that small area that we just marked. So our 2 Huskies can still freely roam around the ice sheet, however they can now no longer access the human meat. The rest of the day then passes by without any further incidents, until at night we have great news to announce, because our Husky Ruby has given birth. Now she only had 1 little puppy here, I had hoped for a few more, but still this adds another potential hauler to the colony, even though it will take Sky here a while until he's fully grown, and until then he can sadly not haul anything. What we can do with him however is to give him a name that is once again chosen by you guys, and for that we'll use the same procedure as last time. If you want to have a chance to name the Husky puppy, then simply leave a comment on the video, and I will once again make a random selection. Now for Cambiar, the next morning begins with the need to do some crafting. His human leather pants have deteriorated a bit, their hit points have gone down to below 50%, and that now makes them worn out apparel. This also immediately gives Cambiar a -3 mood penalty, but luckily we can quickly get rid of that. We have more than enough human leather lying around to make a new pair of pants for Cambiar, which is exactly what we'll do now. This process consumes 50 units of human leather, but even then we are still left with more than 800, so I would say we can just barely afford that. Roughly 5 hours later then the pants are finished. They are unfortunately only of poor quality, but at least that is still 1 quality level higher than the ones that Cambiar has worn so far. Cambiar then spends the remainder of the day at the research bench, and his hard work pays off in the evening. Just as a psychic drone annoys the ice sheet, Cambiar finishes the multi-analyzer research project. Now, at least in theory, this unlocks quite a few new research projects. However, in order to be able to actually research those, we need to build a multi-analyzer. Now, if we had the materials for that, I would build one right away, but unfortunately, the multi-analyzer requires 20 gold to be built. At the moment, we don't have that, and I also haven't spotted any gold on the map yet, so I think the easiest way to get some will be to just wait for another trader to pass by. Now, until that happens, we can of course focus on other projects. One technology, for example, that we have researched a while ago is geothermal power, and I would actually like to build a geothermal power generator soon. However, at the moment we lack a significant amount of steel for that. To construct a geothermal power generator, we need 400 steel, so roughly 300 more than we currently have. For that reason, we are now sending Cambiar out to deconstruct a few of the ship chunks on the map. With the Huskies as our new haulers, the materials should pile up quickly, and Cambiar no longer has to do everything on his own. In the morning hours of the next day then, we are interrupted by another event, as Randy Random sends another escape pod crashing down on the ice sheet. And inside, a colonist who is intriguing to say the least. A maxed out level 20 social skill, this guy right here could be a fantastic trader, while also being able to take care of research and animal handling. Unfortunately though, he is also incapable of violence, which in our situation is already a big problem. The deal breaker then was the nudist trait, because out on the ice sheet walking around naked is one of the quickest ways to get you killed. The permanent mood penalty from wearing clothing would make this colonist a pain to deal with, and so, despite the legendary social skill, we'll leave him out there to die. The smokeleaf dependence, by the way, another big question mark, and with him bleeding out in only 6 hours, I wasn't even sure if it was actually possible to rescue him. So instead, we will now focus our efforts on obtaining more steel. The Huskies are already busy hauling, as Cambiar makes his way up towards 2 more ship chunks. With Cambiar himself, we'll then prioritize the components, because those suffer from deterioration when left outside. The steel, however, does not, so we can leave the steel for later and for the Huskies while Cambiar focuses on the components. Now, admittedly, this method doesn't produce a whole lot of steel, but for me the components are also a very important factor. Not only will we need some for the geothermal generator, but I also plan to build a few coolers soon in an effort to make the base infestation proof, and for those coolers we will need components as well. In the evening then, our master talker on the east end of the map has died, and so before heading off to bed, Cambiar hauls his corpse back to the base. A few moments after that, Ruby follows with a mouth full of smokeleaf joints. Starting off on the next morning, we still need 200 steel, and this time we're going for the fast approach, and that would be to mine some from the deposits that are still on the map. And once again, I have to stress how convenient this is to just leave stuff lying around the map, knowing that the Huskies will be there to pick it up. I know that for many of you who play the game, this is the most normal thing in the world, but for me, who has already spent dozens of hours on this playthrough, and who was forced to do every single task with the same colonist, having multiple haulers is a fantastic change of pace, and looking back, I'm really thankful that the trader passed by who sold us the Huskies. Now, the psychic drone has ended and Cambiar has mined another small steel deposit, and the various members of the colony are now hauling that steel back to the base. A short while later, our reserves are already up to 390, and so with this final trip, Cambiar will now break the threshold of 400. And that means in a moment we will have enough steel stored to build a geothermal power generator, which is exactly what we'll do in the next episode. Yes, we'll sadly have to end this one a bit early, my apologies for that, but if you have followed the last few channel update videos, then you know that I currently have a lot of stuff to do, and sometimes you just have to prioritize your master thesis over a recording session. So I hope you still enjoyed the video, even though it was a slightly shorter one. If you did, I would of course be happy if you could leave a thumbs up, and as always, if you haven't subscribed already, then go ahead and feel free to do so. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.